Hello there everybody, Sam's Trains here and welcome back to the railway. Today I'm looking at another N-gauge loco by Dapol. I was surprised to learn that today's model was first released almost 20 years ago now in 2006, and I found a photo of an early release of this model on the Hatton's website and I'm about to show it, so hold on to your hats. Good God, it looks like a clown or something, doesn't it, in model form. Yeah, it really makes you realise just how far Dapol has come over the past 20 years or so. If you've seen any of their newer locos, regardless of the scale, yeah, their paint jobs, their decoration is just absolutely phenomenal these days. But anyway, back to today's model. It was first released in 2006, but much more recently Dapol have revisited the model. They've kept the body the same, I believe, but they've updated the chassis. I'm not sure if it's an entirely retooled chassis or just a significantly updated one, but it has changed, and also it's been produced to modern standards in terms of decoration. You'll be pleased to hear. So today's model then is this. It is the beautiful Drummond M7, and yeah, you can tell straight away looking at this through the box how much better the decoration looks on here. In fact, it's totally transformed the model, hasn't it? And I've not even had this out of the box yet. The other impressive thing about this is the price. Even at the full RRP, I think this seems pretty reasonable. So on Dapol's website, the full price is £105.79. This version I bought from a retailer for £89.92, and some versions of this model are even cheaper than that now at £84.95. So at face value, that seems to be really good value, but is the model any good? Or is it just some sort of dated nonsense from 2006? That's what I'm interested in finding out today. Anyway, if you'd like to find that out as well, I will pop some affiliate links in the description for you, but for now, let's get this out and let's see if it's any good. So this model is significantly different from what else I've looked at by Dapol in N-gauge. This will be my first tank engine. I've only ever looked at much larger tender engines before. This is also going to be the smallest Dapol N-gauge loco I've ever looked at, and it's also got the fewest wheels of any Dapol N-gauge loco I've tried. So picking up power is going to be a really important one for this. But anyway, let me show you the end of the box. So the product code I've got is 2S-016-006. It is the N-gauge M7 044, beautiful wheel configuration this, in the SWR livery, not LSWR, but SWR, lined green, number 245, and it will handle R1 curves, which is pretty great. So that is all the box tells us. If I show you the back of it, yeah, we've just got the usual warnings and such. So let's delve in and let's see what this is like. I just really am interested to know whether this looks like a 2023 model or whether it looks like a 2006 model. We shall see, but we've got some instructions here, so let's open these up. Okay, M7, important instructions. Unpacking and handling, this appears to work the same as before with the previous steam locos I looked at. It needs light lubrication after every 50 hours of running. This tells you how to do that, although there aren't any diagrams here for that. Running in, well, that's fine. I always run locos in, so I will do that. The booklet opens up backwards, which is a bit frustrating, but fair enough. Here we have the diagram, which shows us the oiling points, and it is pretty typical. Looks like it's just the gears there. Looks like both of the driving wheels are geared, so yeah, you've got your typical slightly over-engineered design here. Not too surprised to see that after the A4 and also the Britannia class. Installing DCC, it looks like we've got access to the decoder socket through the coal bunker, and you have to remove the coal load to get in there, so that's actually pretty handy for N-scale, isn't it? Not having to remove the body to chip this, that's pretty good. It doesn't have a DCC socket though. I read here that you've got to desolder the wires from the blanking chip and then solder the wires to the decoder. So yeah, that doesn't seem dreadfully modern, does it? But then again, it's a tiny loco. I mean, can you imagine a next 18 DCC socket fitting into this? It would be tricky. I mean, Bachmann have done it on smaller locos, but yeah, not easy. And then what have we got here? Accessory parts. Additional detail parts are supplied in plastic bags. Let's see, it looks like we've got dummy screw link couplings, that's pretty good. And that is all the instructions mentioned. So we'll have to see if there's any more. And then this is just the no quibble warranty, which hopefully will not be necessary. So there she is, paintwork looking amazing. Let's start by trying to get this out then. Okay, I'm not seeing an accessories bag at the moment. Oh, it's in the top, so we'll see it in a second. Right, let me grab its ears. Here we go. Tiny little thing. I'll be interested in whether it's heavy or not. Probably not, but we'll see. Right. Okay, there's a lot in here. Yeah, there's a lot. So we've got a tool which looks like it's for undoing crank pins. Fair enough. We've got some alternative couplings here, which seem to be NEM. They're the knuckle style couplings. And here we have those cosmetic couplings that were mentioned, the little screw links there. There's another part there, which I don't quite recognise. And there's even another accessories bag, which has, oh my goodness, tiny little, they look like KDs, but they're even smaller perhaps. But yeah, in terms of coupling provision, you've got an awful lot to go at here. Not sure what's fitted to the Loco as standard, but I guess we'll find out. Anyway, let's strip this foam off. Let's have a look, shall we? Tiny little clamshell style packaging here. Look at this. Okay, first look at the finish. Are you ready? Oh, big splodge of oil. Spoiled the first moment slightly, but yeah, I mean, that is amazing. The size of that boiler is ludicrously small. Look at that. That's my fingernail. Ludicrously small. Yeah, truly, this is the smallest Dapol Loco that I've ever looked at, I believe. Amazing. Right. Oh, yeah. Yeah. It's pretty dense, actually. It's a heavy Loco for its size, and here it is up close. Yeah, I think really it is the paint job that makes this. It's clearly got some lovely details on it, and that is true, but yeah, it is the paintwork, especially having seen that Hatton's image from much earlier on. Yeah, this looks miles better. It doesn't even look like the same model, in fact. Yeah, very impressive, sturdily built. The body is just plastic, I believe, which is a pity. Yeah, a little bit of metal work on here would have improved the weight a little bit. But as it is, the weight is not terrible, and there are no rubber traction tyres on the driving wheels, which I like a lot. The Loco's heavy enough to not need them. And of course, because it's only got, 4 wheels per rail, it needs every single one of those to be picking up power, which does seem to be the way they've designed it. So, great stuff. But anyway, a beautiful model. We'll take a much closer look at this in just a second, and I'm really excited for that. But first, here's a bit of background on the M7 in real life. So the M7 was introduced in 1897 for the LSWR to the design of Dougal Drummond for small passenger trains around the London area. 105 of these were built in total between 1897 and 1911, and they were used on push-pull services, suburban passenger runs, and also on branch lines. In their earlier days, they were also used for mainline passenger services around the south of England, but of course, as more powerful locos were introduced, these were relegated to lighter duties. The class proved to be extremely successful, and this was the largest 044 tank ever to be used in Britain. No larger one was ever produced, which I suppose makes this a good choice for an N-scale loco, as there's a bit more room in it. The engines were transferred to the Southern Railway in 1923 after grouping, where they remained until withdrawal, which began in the late 1930s, although some of them did survive until 1965, so well into the British Railways era. By the end of the steam era, all but 2 had been scrapped, the remaining 2 being housed at the National Railway Museum and the Swanage Railway respectively. So there she is up close and personal for you, Dapol's N-Gauge M7. And I think I've got mixed feelings about this, quite frankly. On the one hand, obviously the decoration is beautiful, and we'll talk more about this later on. Also, I don't think I would have ever guessed that this body dated back to 2006, because it looks absolutely fine for the most part. I mean, the crispness in the tooling and the riveting and such looks absolutely fine. On the downside though, there are some issues. I mean, the biggest one is the body. I mean, is it me or does this body look like it's sloping downwards? It's like it's not fitted onto the chassis properly. Now I've sort of pushed it down gently at the back. It definitely has no give to it. So this might be something I can sort later on when I take the body off and try to look at the mechanism. Maybe not. I mean, is it a fault? Is it supposed to be like that? I don't think so, but it is what it is. There's also a bit of a nasty parting line across the top of the boiler. Yeah, I feel like if Dapol was retooling this loco from the rails up, this probably wouldn't be here, but it is there to see. The other thing is the plastic body construction. Now, the weight is not a problem, I would say. It comes in at 43 grams, which is about 25% heavier than the Bachmann 64XX pannier. And obviously, while this is a lot lighter than the Pacifics I've looked at, that is of course in keeping with the size of the loco. The other thing is that the running plate, while not level, it is perfectly straight, so the fact that it's plastic really hasn't affected anything apart from the weight too much. There is of course also a die-cast chassis on the inside of this model, which is where the weight comes from, and you can also see that underneath the boiler here, which is not dreadfully realistic, but probably necessary. Okay, let's talk about the decoration then, because this has been done fantastically. We've got a great satin finish on the boiler in particular, but the whole loco's been treated to it. The choice of colour looks fantastic. This is a lot better than that Hatton's image I saw earlier on. Yeah, this looks absolutely perfect. The lining is just great on the boiler. Look how good that looks, and there is a lot of lining on this model too. The splashes are lined. The running plate and the steps attached to it, those are lined as well. The tanks, of course, are lined, and they've also got the LSWR lettering on them, which looks great. Lining on the coal bunker, of course, and we've also got the tiny little builder's plate printed onto there, which also looks great. You've also got this reddy brown trim, which is so typical of pre-grouping locos, and that's been done very nicely. The wheels are also painted, and these wheels look a lot better than on the original Dapol M7. Lovely green colour to them with the axles picked out, although the precision of the painting on the axles is a little bit hit and miss. Yeah, quite a bit of misalignment going on here. And then the buffer beams are also beautifully painted, and they've also got the running numbers on them, and the number is also round here on the back of the coal bunker. So decoration, I think, would get full marks. It really does look wonderful. Level of detail is kind of a mixed bag. On the whole, though, I would say it's very, very impressive. So the chassis is well detailed. I think most of this detail is moulded, but the fact that this detail's here is great. We've got separate buffers, which are just plastic, I believe, but the fidelity in the moulding is really, really good. We've also got lamp brackets, which I assume, are just moulded to the running plate, but they're nice and fine. And we've also got a vacuum pipe on here as well. The smoke box door, well, it's got the number board and also a space for the shed code to go, which are not appropriate for this version of the model as far as I know. So obviously they haven't got a tooling variation that allows them to produce the smoke box without these features on them. So we've got the strange situation where those plates are there, but they're not decorated. Yeah, that's not the best. And we've also got the smoke box dart here, which is just a part of the moulding, and from the side that doesn't look the best. The model does have wire handrails though, which is a lovely touch. They look a little bit strange in areas, and it looks like this on both sides, so I'm not quite sure what's going on with that, but from any sort of distance they look fine. And there's also these little separately fitted valves on the side of the boiler, which are not painted up. We don't have the coloured pipe work on it or anything, but it's a nice enough part. The safety valves up on top of the dome, these are not separately fitted, but they are picked out, as you can see. Not too bad looking really, and the whistle behind there is really, really quite good. Just moulded plastic yet again, but it's an infinitesimally small piece, and it's very nicely produced. And all the detail around here, the pipe work and such, that is all separate too, which is great. The tops of the tanks have quite a bit of detail on them. I'm not sure whether this is moulded or separately fitted, but like I said earlier, the quality of the moulding is absolutely fine. And around the cab, these handrails around the cab doors, these are just a part of the moulding, but they've been very well moulded so that they stand out. And surprisingly, we have full cab detail modelled here. None of it is painted, unfortunately, which I think is a real pity, because this would have looked just stunning if it was. But the fact that all of this detail is moulded into this and it has a realistic cab space at all is very impressive. And I noticed there's also an opening for the firebox as well. I don't think this has got lighting on it, but it sure would be impressive if it did. Behind here we've got the coal bunker, which is nicely moulded externally, but the coal load inside it doesn't look the greatest. I mean, firstly, it's not a great fit to the bunker. There is a big gap behind it there. And also the fidelity in the moulding makes the coal look pretty large. In fact, the scale of this coal looks comparable to 00 scale coal, really. Yeah, I reckon that could have been made a little bit finer. And then around the back, we've got all of these lamp brackets, which are just a part of the moulding, and that makes perfect sense. Below there, a similarly detailed buffer beam, and then at the bottom here, we've got the N-scale couplings, and these are the ones that are fitted as standard. So I would say this is perfectly okay. There are some issues with it, things that I think should have been better, and the fit of the body is an ongoing concern. I'll have to investigate this and see what's going on. Otherwise though, I think the downfalls of this model are very much reflected in the price. I mean, I paid just £89.92 for this. I mean, for that money, it's a relatively complex model. It seems to be well built, and it's certainly well painted. And like I say, you can get some examples of this model for even less than that. So value doesn't seem to be too bad at the moment, which is a good thing too, because there are elements of this model which are certainly not that premium. However, I am interested to see how this performs. I think at the moment this review could swing either way. I think if the mechanism and the performance are good, then this will be a positive review overall. If I've got issues, then I don't think the outcome's going to be so great. But anyway, let's get started and let's find out. So there she is, the M7 down onto the track, and I have just filmed the initial performance test and running in, and I'll show you all that in just a second. After that, I did a disassembly to look at the mechanism, and that's what I'm going to talk you through now. So in some ways the mechanism is quite simple, and it's simple in a couple of different senses. So in some areas it's simple yet effective and it works really well. In other ways it's simple in that it's quite basic and free of features, and hopefully you'll see what I mean. In other ways though, it is quite a complicated model in that it's a little bit over-engineered, and you can probably guess what I'm referring to. But first let's talk pickups. So I could see that there were no wiper pickups on the bogie wheels. Instead they pick up through the axles via these conductive bus bars, but I was curious to see exactly how this worked, so I decided to pop the bogie off. So the bogie passes power up to the chassis using these contacts, which is a pretty interesting design, and we have seen this a few times. Can't recall it in N-gauge before, but I've certainly seen it in 00 with some Dapol and Bachmann designs. There's also these plastic insulators on the axles, and of course it's these plastic parts that hold the two wheels together, and that's the downside of split chassis designs like this. These do seem to be holding the wheels quite nicely though. The base keeper plate is held on with a couple of screws, and to get to those I had to remove the brake rigging, but no major problem. And as you can see, both of the axles here are geared, which, yeah, this is what I mean when I say it's a touch overcomplicated. Don't really think this is necessary, and of course it does render the coupling rods redundant, which it really doesn't need to. I have seen locos that are N-gauge that do use the coupling rods without any problems. So yeah, pity about that. Obviously these extra gears are going to zap some of the energy from the motor, but it's not too much of a big deal because it does work well. And yeah, this is a split chassis loco, so the chassis is split in half and power is picked up through the axles. Not sure if this has separate bearings to pick up power through the axles, or whether the axles touch the chassis directly. I can't actually see the bearings here, but I suppose it doesn't matter too much because of how light the model is. Then in terms of DCC, you have to remove the coal load to access the blanking plate, but bear in mind this is not a socket, this is a blanking plate which has wires soldered to it, and if you want to chip this loco you'd have to desolder those wires and then resolder them to a decoder, so it's not really DCC ready. I think if you wanted a DCC fitted M7, I would just buy one factory fitted, because this is going to be a bit of a faff. In terms of body removal, the body's only held on with one screw, and it's the front base keeper screw, so the rear of the model is not fixed to the body at all, and I think that's why we've got this issue of the body sort of not sitting straight on the chassis. Not very keen on that really. But in terms of weight, we've got the smoke box packed with weight here, and obviously that shifts the centre of gravity for the loco forwards, which is much needed with this wheel configuration. And you can see we've also got the die-cast chassis, which does have a fair bit of metal on board, and you can see that it's particularly meaty just over the driving wheels here, which again shows a competent design. The motor is an interesting choice. I was kind of expecting a coreless motor here, but it's not coreless. This is a traditional motor, but it does run absolutely fine, so no issue with the choice of motor, except you can see there is no flywheel fitted to it, which is a pity. Again, we have seen locos at this gauge which do have flywheels, and that does seem to improve the reliability of the locos. But like I say, performance not a huge issue with this one. And then the back-to-back gauging comes in at 7.2 to 7.5 millimeters back-to-back, which is a little bit inconsistent, but it doesn't seem to be causing any major issues. So there you have it, quite a simple mechanism really, no DCC socket per se, it's just literally a motor with quite a lot of gears driving the wheels, and that's pretty much it. So with that, let's jump back in time and let me show you how this performed. Okay, so I'm genuinely curious to see how well this runs. Is it going to be reliable? Well, let's find out whether it works at all. Here we go. Set the direction. Let's give it some power. Here goes. Yes, it works. And it just went over the point without stopping. It's now stopped on the curve. Okay. Okay, well, obviously the usual caveats apply because I haven't run this in yet. It hasn't done any running besides the 4 seconds that you've just seen it do. But I have to say, right out of the box, it doesn't seem bad, especially compared with the other tank engine I've got in N-Gauge, which is the Bachmann 64 pannier. That one is really ropey now. I'm going to have to, well, clean the wheels, take it to pieces really, clean the axles where they pick up power, because that one is so ropey now. So in comparison, this seems really, really good, and it's not cut out since that initial issue it had. I wonder what the torque is like. Let me bring it into shot, set the direction, and let's see. Has it got power? Yeah, loads of power. Great, that looks good. What is the gearing and speed like then? I'll run by at 50% power, half power. Ready? Ooh, speedy. Yeah, it's a fast one. They usually are though, I suppose, aren't they? Yep, I dread to know what full speed looks like. Yeah, to be fair, it doesn't get much faster. Oh, 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 yeah, it didn't like that. It went so fast that it derailed itself there, but amazingly put itself back on the track. I don't know. Okay, so let's put it just here, and I'll move the camera slightly, and let's see what the crawl is like straight out of the box. Now, obviously, I'm going to film this test again once I've run this in fully, but for now, as it's brand new, let's see what this is like as a crawler. So, turning up very, very slowly and gently. Oh. Gosh. For N-Gauge, not bad at all. Quite coggy, not a smooth motion, but it was able to move itself slowly and without stalling. Now, is it going to make me eat my words on that? It's not as good in reverse. Yeah, it seemed to struggle in reverse. Let's try it forwards again. And this is what it'll have to beat, if possible, after it's run in. Here we go. Yeah, just struggling a little bit. Oh, yeah, it did stall then in the end. But that's not bad. That is pretty darn good. I think that is possibly better than what I've seen before. Certainly on a tank engine. Yeah, and it's going over the points very happily there. So it's looking great, yeah. I mean, for what it is, to say how tiny this is, to say that it's not got all the wheels that a tender loco would have, picking up power, I'm struggling to fault this, really. So with that, let's run this in. Let's see if it gets any better after an hour's running. So here we go, 50%. All right, so there she goes. Yeah, it is very fast. I think under normal circumstances, you would want to turn it down from here, really. But I'm going to run it in at 50% speed because I think that's best for the motor. Must be said though, yeah, it's so quick that it kind of wobbles on the curves. I don't know whether that's because of the wheels or just because of how fast those coupling rods are whizzing round. But yeah, it doesn't look dreadfully realistic on the curves at this speed, although hopefully once I run it a bit more slowly later on, with some coaches of course, hopefully that wobbling won't happen, at least not to this extent. But yeah, it's running happily. At this speed at least, it's not throwing itself off the track on the points or anything, so it's not too crazily fast or anything. And I'll have to say I do love the way this looks. It just looks great, doesn't it? Everything about this, from any sort of distance, looks superb. But anyway, I'll let this continue to run and then we'll come back and see how this hauls. Okay, I'll be back. Alright, I am back, and yeah, the performance, it's a bit of a mixed bag for me, really. I mean, it's alright, it doesn't constantly stop and it doesn't derail like the Britannia did, but equally, yeah, it's just not the strongest in the world, particularly on the curves. I mean, on the straights like this, it's great, really, really good. It doesn't even care about points, which is impressive. But as soon as it gets onto the curves, yeah, it starts that wobbling if you're going a bit on the quick side. And it almost kind of keeps stopping almost, but then saving itself. Hopefully you'll see what I mean in a second when this runs. So yeah, I don't really know what the answer would be to fix this. Perhaps a little bit more weight on the wheels and axles to improve the continuity, because it does seem to be the curves that upsets this. Otherwise though, I'm not entirely sure. But here on the straight, like I say, it's absolutely fantastic. So let's show you how this goes now. Let me just clear it of the points and let's see if the crawl is any more reliable now. Here we go, turning up. Come on, don't let me down. There we go. I mean, for N scale, that is insane, isn't it? And it's a bit more reliable too now that it's run in. It's not so coggy, I don't think. Reverse, it wasn't so good in reverse before, so what's it like now? Oh, that was my fault. Yeah, even better in reverse. Not as good still though. But there we go, it went over the points there without stopping. I was not expecting that. So yeah, the pickups do seem to work fine on the straight. It's just the curves, and you'll see what I mean. In fact, at the slower speeds, at this kind of speed, it won't actually take the curves, it'll cut out. And I will demo that in just a second. But I did want to couple this up to some rolling stock, and I do have some Southern coaches that I'm waiting to review, but at the moment they are still in their boxes because I haven't filmed them yet. So instead I've gone for a bit of a goods train, which unfortunately has a bit of a Great Western flavour to it. So apologies for the Great Western wagons and the towed brake van, but you know, it'll do as a bit of a hauling test. So let's back up and see how the couplings work. Hopefully they'll go without a problem. Here we go. Well, we are on a curve here, so I'll have to see how we get on. It's done it, but the loco's stalled. Right. Come in. No, there we go. Bit of a nudge then. Okay. Right, so let me see if I can demo the issue. Look, perfectly nice on the straights. But then once it gets onto the curve, yeah, it's shaking all over the place. Doesn't seem to be struggling too much actually now. But yeah, you can tell that it just kind of loses power occasionally. There we go, there was one there. Gets a little bit spotty. And then it gets back to the straight and it's perfect again. Let me slow it down a bit more. And you might be able to see it a bit better. Yeah, see? And it never does this on the straight. It's just as soon as it hits the curve it starts to do it, which is weird. Hopefully it'll get round the top. Now, there we go. So, you know, at the higher speeds, if you're actually, I suppose, going to use this for express passenger work, it's going to be okay. And maybe it's a little unfair to ask it to haul freight and go slow like this, but, you know, I think a loco should be able to do that, really. And this one can't. So I think for this running session, I'm going to have to turn it up a little bit, and hopefully that will be better. So yeah, there you have it. It's not the greatest really, but I've done a bit of testing. It looks like anything 30 and above on the controller is fine, it doesn't cut out. But then I suppose once you get to about 50 on the controller, it starts to look quite fast, in fact a bit too fast. So you've actually only got a pretty narrow range of speeds on the controller that work reliably, but also look halfway realistic, which isn't the best. But torque-wise, it's absolutely fine. I mean, it's making mincemeat of these wagons. And when I do review my Southern coaches, I'll couple those up to this loco. This would be the ideal loco for those. And I don't expect to see any issues with that either, although time will tell. So yeah, a very mixed bag. I think the performance is better than it perhaps could have been, and I'm sure it's going to be better than the original N-Gage M7. If anybody's got one of the older Dapol models, what were those like? I mean, if this is better than those, then the old ones I would expect would be really quite dodgy, but I don't know, I've not tried one. But yeah, it's a lovely looking loco, quite enjoyable to run. It's just lacking a little bit, I think. I just wish it was a little bit more reliable on the curves. Let's have some ratings then for Dapol's M7 in N-Gage, which they upgraded last year or thereabouts. So the level of detail, I've given a kind of middle of the road score of 3.5. Yeah, it's actually pretty impressive, especially considering how far back the bodywork here dates. So the decoration in particular is really, really good, impressed with that. Also the quality of the moulding, given the age of the tooling, is still very impressive. I like that a lot. On the downside though, there's a lot of plastic parts here. The buffers are plastic. We don't have any metallic effect on the pipework. It's all just done with a plastic finish. Yeah, not the most convincing. There's no space or detail between the frames. That's just taken up by the chassis. The cab detail is amazing. There is full moulded cab detail in here, but none of it picked out. If there was just a little bit of that detail picked out, I think it would look amazing. Also, the coal load really wasn't the best. It's quite a chunky thing, doesn't really stay where it's put either, it moves all over the place. Yeah, I think by modern standards, parts of this model could be a bit more refined. The performance, well, this is a tricky one because if I was rating it on just straight track, it would get at least a 4, maybe even a 5. It's great over points, it doesn't stutter or stall, it can crawl reasonably well, it's got loads of torque and power, but the moment it hits a curve, even the third radius curve, that's when the trouble starts. It becomes a little bit unreliable. Anything below about half power, it starts threatening to stall, it becomes quite spotty in terms of continuity with the track. And of course you can improve this by speeding it up, but at the high speeds it kind of wobbles and waddles, and on a couple of occasions it's even derailed itself, either because of the relatively light weight of the thing or because of the waddling. So yeah, not the greatest performance in the world, but it's not the worst. I mean, it's a lot more reliable than the Britannia was. Pulling power, I don't have the tools to measure, unfortunately, but what I can say is that a good amount of the loco's weight is over the drivers, which is good, and there's plenty of torque in the mechanism, so it is going to be a decent hauler, given the loco's size, of course. The mechanism, again, is a kind of upper middle of the road score for me. I mean, the pickups seem to be really good. We've got all-wheel pickups. They do seem to work pretty well, at least on the straight. But on the downside, it's not that easy to clean the pickups because it's a split chassis mechanism. If you actually wanted to properly clean out the bearings and the contacts, you'd have to take the wheels out, full disassembly. It'd be a bit of a nightmare. It also doesn't have a proper DCC socket. We've just got this kind of hard-wired blanking plate in there, and you'd have to do a lot of custom soldering in order to chip this, and there's not that much room for a decoder either. The motor does seem to be a good quality one and it performs well, but it doesn't have a flywheel. Again, for a loco of this size, I think a flywheel would have been great to see, and there's an almost perfect little spot for one inside the smoke box, but that wasn't done. Quality then, again, it's going to be 3-star, lots of 3 stars this time. Yeah, there's a lot of good in this model. I mean, the quality of the decoration on the whole is great, but there's a little bit of wobbly lining around the coal bunker, and the precision of the painting on the wheels could have been a little bit better. The body is also made of plastic. I think a bit more weight on this model would have improved the traction, of course. It would have made it feel better quality, and it might even have improved the continuity with the rails, which is a big thing with this loco. Also, the fit of the body isn't the best. It's just screwed on at the front. The back half of the chassis is just kind of free to float, and as we saw when I unboxed this, the body wasn't a great fit to the chassis. So yeah, 3-star, quality could have been quite a bit better. This loco's saving grace though is definitely value. So the full price for this is £105.79. I think that isn't too bad. I'd probably give it kind of middle of the road 3-star. At the retailers though, you can pick these up for about £85 to £90 depending on which version you go for. I paid £89.92 for mine, and for these prices I think it's perfectly reasonable. It's not the best in the world, but it's not horrifically expensive, so I don't consider it to be poor value. So yeah, 4-star, not bad at all. Overall then, that is 6.70 out of 10. Yeah, I do like this model, but I've got to be objective about this, and objectively it's not great. In places it looks quite dated, doesn't work brilliantly either. That is a grade of E, so not quite a fail, but I think I've certainly seen better in N-Gauge. And into the logbook it goes, where it is 4th place, just between the Dapol A4 and the Dapol Britannia. And I'd say that's about right. Yeah, this is somewhere between the two. Nowhere near as dodgy as the Britannia, but not quite as impressive and reliable as the A4. So there you have it then, folks. That was my full review on the Dapol M7 in N-Gauge. And yeah, this loco has taught me that Dapol's N-Gauge steamers really are a mixed bag, aren't they? I've seen some that are great, some that are really not great, and some that are in between, and I think this one is in between. Obviously, this is a slightly older design. I don't know how much of the chassis is from 2006, but I would hope that any new tooled N-Gauge locos that Dapol make would be quite a bit better than this. But you know, that's no excuse really. These are still in Dapol's range. It's not like I'm reviewing an old example or anything. So yeah, I think these are fair comments to make. And like I say, the thing that does make this slightly better is that it is quite affordable, particularly compared with other locos. So yeah, there we go. I like the model, but yeah, I really think it could and should have been better, even really at the price I paid, because yeah, it's not really that much cheaper than the Dapol Hawthorne Leslie, and this pales in comparison with that. So yeah, not the greatest, but it's okay. It's okay. So please do comment down below. Let me know what you think, and I'll come at you again very, very soon. Oh, that sounded a bit brutal, didn't it? I'm going to come at you with another review, but I will indeed, should you want me to. All right, cheers, folks. You take care.